Do you trust WWE? And does it matter if you don't? This isn't a WWE burial video. You may see it that way, but this is coming from somebody who has been a fan of WWE before they got the F out. If it wasn't for the World Wrestling Federation, I wouldn't be in your internet right now talking about whether we should trust the WWE or not. You know, I became a wrestling fan because of the WWF. I was a lapsed fan for a bit in the mid-90s, and then when I came back to wrestling, it was again because of the WWF, and it's been a big part of my life for the majority of my life. And we often get very tribal about wrestling. Either you're in the one camp or the other camp, and whichever camp you're in, they have to be without fault. And I don't think that's the case. I am a WWE fan. I'm also an AEW fan. I'm also an Impact fan. I'm also a New Japan fan. I'm a wrestling fan. And I think as a wrestling fan, it's very much like following a football team or a soccer team. My dad is a fan of West Bromwich Albion and has been his entire life. Through even the rotten seasons, he will be a fan. He'll continue to support. They'll have some awful times as a West Brom fan, but it doesn't stop them calling out when things go wrong. And I feel like I'm doing that now with WWE more than ever. But again, it's because I'm a fan of WWE. And right now, I find myself at a point where I don't know if I trust them. I'll explain what I mean. As I grew up as a wrestling fan, I saw, your classic wrestling stories played out, and some would be played out over several months. Off the top of my head, I think about Ric Flair and Randy Savage from WrestleMania 8. The whole, she was mine before she was yours, Randy. And the story that played out between these two and a woman that was in the mix, and Ric Flair trying to turn the tide away from Randy Savage and Liz. And then it was the triumphant victory of Randy Savage to get the WWF Championship away from this wrong-un. Like, that is the sort of storytelling that I was always passionate about. And I guess that with wrestling for a long time, I always knew that eventually the story that we would see play out would pay off. You know, Steve Austin, the march of Stone Cold Steve Austin through the 1998 Royal Rumble, standing up to D-Generation X and defeating Shawn Michaels to usher in the Attitude Era. That was a story that was paid off and then continued to grow throughout the year. Then we got Vince McMahon and Steve Austin and that rivalry there, and how that paid off in a very satisfactory manner. And as a wrestling fan now, I find that I'm getting less payoff for storylines that I'm seeing. And we are told a lot to trust the process when it comes to these things. And I say it a lot in news videos. I say, let's just trust the process and let's see where it goes. And quite often, a phrase like that just kind of falls a bit flat, because what tends to happen is, now that WWE don't seem as intent on creating these big moments anymore, they're not as intent on seeing them through. How many times as a wrestling fan, particularly a WWE fan, can you think where you thought, here's a really obvious payoff to an amazing story, and that hasn't happened? And you've left feeling, I feel silly now for investing my time in this. There's two instances off the top of my head in terms of storylines that I can think of, one of them being Finn Balor and Roman Reigns. There's a great example. The Demon Finn Balor rising to try and defeat Roman Reigns, the top turnbuckle breaks, and he loses. And I sat there on a news video and said, let's see how this plays out. The truth is, it didn't. There was no storyline reason for why the top rope broke. There was no overarching explanation and nothing really that led to anything. WWE just needed a way out of the match and hadn't really thought that far ahead. And stuff like that has left me at a point where I don't know if I trust them with things anymore. And it's not just storylines. The whole NXT call-up system, for the longest of times, has left me with a deep feeling of untrustworthiness about WWE. We make songs about it and we've made lots of laughs and jokes about it, but genuinely, Keith Lee is a guy that when he got called up to the main roster, that should have been a moment of warmth and joy. But because of the fact that WWE for the longest of times hasn't known how to deal with a called up member of the roster without having to kind of put it through this weird creative Play-Doh machine to see what comes out the other end, I don't have any faith in when they get called up that they will land properly. So it's almost like I feel stupid for investing time and energy. I'm made to feel stupid for investing time and energy into a wrestler who gets called up only to get released. And that's a real problem. Like, I want to be able to put faith in WWE to tell these stories that have a payoff. And I think what we're learning more often than not is that WWE don't really have payoffs to stories. And I get that as a fan of a certain vintage, the landscape has changed in wrestling. 100% get that. When I was growing up with wrestling, you had 4, maybe 5 big pay-per-view events a year. And then you had like sporadic, had superstars tapings, wrestling challenge tapings. So stories had to be told over a longer period of time. Whereas now, like, WWE puts out, 20 hours of new content across all platforms every week? Maybe even more than that. So the churn is greater. But even through all of that, I'm only seeing vague little bits of storytelling. Like some of the best storytelling in WWE has been stuff that's been on the periphery of WWE. Stuff that you probably haven't seen. For example, Ilya Dragunov on NXT UK, right? He lost a match to Volta during the lockdown era of NXT UK, and it sent him into a tailspin, and he had to mentally recover and learn to channel his rage before he could go for Volta again. And then when he did, he had his number, and Ilya Dragunov is the NXT UK champion. That was a story that was told over several months, and it proves that WWE can do it. So why aren't they doing it when more people are watching? Monday Night Raw, especially, is so hit and miss at the moment. Everything is so rushed. Everything is so lost. But yet you have on the periphery these stories like the Dragunov and Volta one, which prove that they can tell longer stories. And I, for one, am really confused as to why that is the case. And it could just simply come down to the way that it's consumed, in the sense that WWE doesn't necessarily want my fandom anymore. I'm a long-term wrestling fan. I'm already sold on the idea of wrestling. They will constantly look for, and I found this when arranging interviews, WWE are always keen to go to avenues and outlets which aren't historically wrestling fan based. They'll go to newspapers and radio stations because they want to pull in new wrestling fans. So therefore, they want to present a product which is easy for them to pick up. So I'm not really the target audience anymore, a long-suffering wrestling fan who likes long-term storytelling. They just want to sell something that looks bright and shiny for 3 hours. And that's why I'm at a point where I don't think I trust WWE anymore. And I really hate saying that. I don't trust that there's, even with someone like Roman Reigns, who is one of who is the top guy in WWE, hands down right now. He's had a lengthy run as Universal Champion. He's very much top of the tree on SmackDown. I don't think they have an end game for that title reign. But I feel like years gone by, there probably would have been something bubbling away there. And I don't feel like there is. So, do you trust WWE? And it's okay if you do. I know that the comment section here is going to be full of very angry people who think that I'm just WWE bashing. And I am a massive WWE fan, and I have been my entire life. Like, wrestling has walked beside me as one of my greatest passions, and a lot of that wrestling and a lot of those great wrestling memories have come from WWE. They still do. But I'm at a point where I can't get invested in characters because They are one mass release away from being taken off my screen. They're one quick rewrite away from being forgotten about. They're one rushed pay-per-view away from being shoved into the corner. And does it matter if I don't trust WWE? No, it doesn't. Because regardless, I'm just one person. I'm just one weirdy beardy. You could start hashtag cancel WWE Network 1,000 times over, but they will always make bank. And there will always be eyes on the product. There'll be people, and they'll be down there, who will be defending WWE to the end. And that's fine. Like, I'm not telling you how to conduct yourself as a wrestling fan at all. Just be nice is all I say. But for me, I don't think it matters to WWE if I don't trust them, because they're not necessarily interested in buying me as a customer anymore. They want people who are channel hopping to go, what's this bright and shiny thing? Oh, I remember the wrestling from the past. Is it like that? I'm locked in. That's what they're after. It's a bit like those insurance providers, isn't it? Where like new customers will get a special discount. What do the old customers get? You just keep paying us. It's a bit like that. I feel like an old insurance customer, maybe. But that's just my thoughts on it. I wanted to take a moment just to chat with you about it. And you know what? You might be completely in agreeal, for lack of a better term, with what I've said here today. Maybe you feel like you can't trust WWE. Maybe you feel like it doesn't matter anymore. You may be of the mindset that I am an anti-WWE, pro-AEW machine, cog in the machine. And here's the thing as well, right? With AEW, they don't do everything right. They did a great long-term story with Kenny Omega and Hangman Page. I loved that. But they're a bit guilty of some of the hotshot booking and stuff themselves. They are. Sorry, but they are. But they do a lot of good stuff, as do Impact, as do New Japan, as do WWE. If you want to think this is a WWE bashing video, then that is on you, really, and that is your interpretation from the words that I've said. I'm sitting here as somebody who, as a kid, fell in love with wrestling because of the World Wrestling Federation, because of WWE. And that's on you. Think what you will to this, and I'd love to know what you think. If you think that I'm talking out of my bottom, let me know in the comments. And if you agree, let me know in the comments as well. Stay safe. Love you, bye.